Hi there, this is Solitary Rowan from Solitary Rowan Films, and welcome to another One Director, 4 films. Today we're going to talk about the great Michael Powell, arguably my second favourite director of all time. What can you say about Michael Powell? Obviously famous for his collaboration with Emmerich Pressburger as the Archers, who have made simply some of the greatest films of all time. So for this series, if you're new to it, one fundamental film that sums up the director, one favourite film, one underrated or underseen gem, and one flounder, the film that doesn't really work for you or the film you watch the least. Obviously the Michael Powell fundamentals and favourites could go a lot of ways. That's a lot of ways. So many amazing films. When everybody else was doing one thing, Powell and Pressburger were off doing something completely different, which meant for long parts of their career they were overlooked or underappreciated. It wasn't until kind of later life, Michael Powell, thanks to Scorsese, again one of Scorsese's best or greatest achievements, is kind of shining a light on or restoring other filmmakers or other films. But for the fundamental one, I've kind of went for an obvious one, but again, there's so many that could be fundamental Michael Powell films. It's The Red Shoes. It pretty much contains a lot of things that run through Powell films, Pressburger. It's pure art. It's a visual feast. Sound, music, colour, emotion. The Red Shoes, there may be a novelisation of it, but The Red Shoes has to be a film. It works on its purest level as a film. It's about not only art, but the sacrifice for art, the pain you have to suffer for art or for great art. It's a well-known fact that in general terms, filmmakers and films that were a struggle to make, were difficult to make, a lot of the times that's what produces great art. If you have all the money in the world, all the budget in the world, all the tools at your disposal, everything's easy, generally films don't turn out that well. If you take Jaws for example, if Jaws was done all CGI and in a tank, it probably wouldn't have been as good a film as it being hell out in the ocean with a shark that didn't work. It would be a completely different film if it had all the tools and all the technology to do it. So The Red Shoes, it has regular actors, it's got a great score, it has set pieces, the production design, the cinematography. When you think of Michael Powell, you think of pure art. When you think of Pressburger, The Archers, it's just pure art. And The Red Shoes, I think, is a fundamental choice. But again, they have so many that could be fundamental. Same with favourite. I mean, picking one favourite is ridiculous for Michael Powell. But for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to go with Black Narcissus. But I could have went with many others. Life, Death of Colonel Blimp. for example. Black Narcissus, nuns go crazy in the Himalayas, but it's actually on a set. Deborah Kerr's just fantastic. David Farrar, Andy Shorts, tremendous. These shorts should have got an Oscar. Easily my favourite nun film. Jack Cardiff cinematography. The most devastating use of lipstick in cinema history. And again, it has the little elements of horror. Kathleen Byron at the end, almost possessed. You know, there's a little bit of horror in the red shoes. There's horror elements in Tales of Hoffman. If you actually go through all of Powell and Pressburger's films, there is an underlying little scene here and there of horror. Pretty much most of Michael Powell's films, obviously Peeping Tom being the overtly one, but even one I'm going to talk about is The Flounder. There's little elements of horror, which is a kind of understated thing about Michael Powell's cinema. But Black Narcissus it's perfect. Just so wonderful. You know, the nun that ends up planting flowers instead of the vegetables she's supposed to be planting. And that warm, seductive wind that you can almost sense through the screen. It's just absolutely magical. Again, nobody was doing what Powell and Pressburger were doing. For the underrated, again, there's quite a few could mention. On the Ronan Nazarin Talks channel, one of our last videos was A Canterbury Tale and I Know Where I'm Going, which both could be an underrated gem. They're films that when you watch them you go, why don't I watch this more often, because it's absolutely brilliant. But for me, for the underrated gem is one of my favourites. It's probably higher than some of the more well-regarded films, but it's The Spy in Black with Conrad Veidt. I absolutely love this film. Conrad Veidt, who doesn't love Conrad Veidt? But this is so Powell and Pressburger because it's about a Nazi U-boat captain, or German U-boat captain, played by Conrad Veidt, whose mission is to go up north of Scotland, where Michael Powell lived, and with the help of a corrupt British officer and an undercover female spy who's posing as a school teacher, he's going to help to blow up half the British fleet. But things don't necessarily go to plan. Co-stars Valerie Hobson and Marius Goring, of course, a Powell regular. It's just so well done, so economical. It's probably my favourite of their quote-unquote straight kind of World War II films. But the genius of Powell and Pressburger that obviously got them into trouble with Churchill and like Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is you have sympathy for characters you're not supposed to have sympathy for. So for me at least, I know I'm a weirdo, but I'm rooting for Conrad Veidt to be successful. And when things don't go perhaps according to plan, you actually feel bad for him, which again is just brilliant writing and brilliant acting. And again, that nuance, that ambiguity that you're not supposed to have if you're making a World War II film. But The Spy in Black is just a fantastic film that really needs a proper Blu-ray release. And that's my underrated gem. But again, with Powell, you could pick so many for at least the first three categories. So for The Flounder, I'm going to pick a film that I only saw recently. This is Honeymoon. This is Powell without Pressburger. This is the year before Peeping Tom. This was a film, a co-Spanish production. It's part travelogue and part kind of ballet film. He really made it for the money. There's a wonderful interview with a production associate from the film, Judith Coxhead, which is actually quite moving because Powell would be waiting for sunsets to get a specific shot, and the kind of Spanish crew were like, "Why are you doing this? This is just a waste of time." And of course, she's like, "Do you not realise who this is? You know, this is the guy who did the Red Shoes." But also, the Red Shoes was almost a decade, or was a decade before this, and it's just kind of sad because obviously the Spanish crew were just there to do a job, and she felt, you can kind of tell that she felt almost like hurt because there's no reverence of, you know, this is Michael Powell. The film is really uneven. The lead is Anthony Steele, who's pretty bad. Apparently there was problems with him on set. It stars Ludmila Chirina, who's also in Tales of Hoffman, and Antonio, and it really brightens up with Leonid Messine, who was in The Red Shoes and Tales of Hoffman. So it's part travelogue. It's about a couple. Again, she's a retired ballet dancer. She could actually be the same character from The Red Shoes that retired. And they're driving about Spain in their Rolls Royce, and they kind of come across Antonio, who's a dancer and an emotional, hot-headed dancer who knows who Chirina is and tries to tempt her back out of retirement. And of course, Anthony Steele was like the square-jawed, "No, do you want to fight about it?" So there's lots of scenes where they literally just put a camera in the front of the Rolls Royce and shot lots of scenery. It's 107 minutes. It should have been about 85. But there is a ballet sequence which again has horror elements in it, which is really quite interesting. And that's when the film kind of becomes a lot more interesting. It is a bit of a misfire, but I'm still happy to have it in the collection, and it's great that it's on Blu-ray because there's so many Michael Powell films that aren't on Blu-ray. I mean, not a complete disaster, but it's not one I'm going to revisit that often, and if I do, it will be for the ballet sequence, with Messine almost like a supernatural force that turns up. There's wonderful scenes of people coming out of coffins, and again, it's that underrated and under talked about horror element in Powell films, but it suffers from the lead. Anthony Steele is pretty terrible, to be honest, but there's still things to like about it, but again, it's far from Powell's best work. And of course, the following year, as I said, he would make Peeping Tom, which practically ended his career, and of course, years later, it was kind of seen as the masterpiece that it actually is, in my opinion. My opinion is not fact. So, thanks very much for watching the Michael Powell episode of One Director, 4 Films. I look forward to your choices, because again, these could be all over the place because there's so much choice for fundamental Powell films, favourite Powell films, underrated Powell films. He's an absolute master, in my opinion, greatest British director of all time, and it's not close. But again, my opinion is not fact. So thanks so much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.